Hello everyone, and welcome to my CBS Wonderful Today channel. I hope everyone is having a wonderful day. Before we begin, please hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. Claire had always sensed that something was off, an undercurrent of deception that she couldn't quite put her finger on, a subtle tension in Holden's eyes and the way Sienna's laughter sometimes rang false, like a hollow echo meant to mask the truth. And tonight, as she stood outside the grand Newman estate, the city lights casting a pale glow across the manicured lawns, a storm of suspicion and dread collided in her chest, making her hands tremble as she held the envelope she had discovered. Earlier in the day, a carefully hidden letter addressed to Holden, the handwriting unmistakable, the words cryptic yet unmistakably dangerous, threatening to unravel everything she thought she knew about the people she had trusted, the people she had loved, the people she had believed were untouchable in their charade of perfection. And as she crept through the darkened hallways of the mansion, her heart hammering in a rhythm that matched the pounding rain outside, she recalled the countless times she had ignored her instincts, chalking up the unease to paranoia or fatigue. But now, with the letter in her grasp and the sense of betrayal sharp in her mind, she could no longer deny the truth lurking behind Holden's carefully constructed facade and Sienna's practiced smiles, and every step toward the drawing room felt heavier, laden with the weight of the revelation she was about to uncover. Because the truth, once revealed, could not be undone, could not be softened by excuses or alibis, and as she reached the doorway, she saw them both, Holden, usually so composed, his jaw tight and hands clenched, and Sienna, her eyes darting like cornered prey, and in that moment, the veil of lies that had shrouded their relationship for months, for years perhaps, shattered into 1,000 irreparable pieces, and Claire realized, with a mixture of rage, heartbreak, and vindication, that the countless nights she had spent doubting herself, questioning her own judgment, had been wasted. Because Holden and Sienna had been orchestrating a deception so intricate, so callous, that it threatened not only her own sense of reality but the fragile stability of everyone around them, and as she stepped forward, the storm outside intensifying as if mirroring the chaos within her, memories flooded her mind, the whispered conversations she had overheard, the hurried phone calls that ended abruptly when she entered a room. The way Holden's eyes would flicker with guilt whenever she broached certain topics, the moments of intimacy with Sienna that had always seemed tinged with a hidden agenda. And now, the truth lay bare before her, unrelenting and undeniable, that Holden and Sienna had conspired behind her back, manipulating circumstances, bending truths, and hiding secrets that could destroy careers, friendships, and hearts. And as she confronted them, though words remained unspoken, the weight of the revelation hung between them like a thundercloud, pregnant with consequences. As she understood that there was no returning to ignorance, no pretending that everything was fine, because the web of lies they had spun had not only ensnared her but threatened to entangle everyone she cared about, the Newmans, the Abbotts, and even the unsuspecting employees of Newman Enterprises, all of whom depended on trust and transparency in ways she now knew were illusions. And as Holden's face betrayed fleeting glimpses of fear and Sienna's composure cracked ever so slightly, Claire felt an unfamiliar sense of empowerment rising from the pit of despair, a clarity born of pain, and in that clarity, she vowed that no more lies would ever dictate her life, that no secret, no manipulation, no betrayal would ever again hold her hostage, because now she knew the truth, and armed with that knowledge, she would navigate the treacherous waters of Genoa City with a resolve as fierce as any storm that raged outside. As her mind raced through strategies, questions, confrontations, and the inevitable fallout, realizing that Holden and Sienna's deception had consequences that extended far beyond their personal ambitions, impacting business deals, family alliances, and the delicate balance of power that kept the elite of Genoa City in check. And as she took a deep, steadying breath, feeling the surge of adrenaline and clarity, she recognized that this revelation marked a turning point, not only in her own life but in the tangled, twisted narrative of the city itself. And though the road ahead would be fraught with confrontation, heartbreak, and shocking betrayals, Claire was ready, steeled by the bitter taste of lies uncovered, prepared to hold those responsible accountable, to expose the hidden agendas, and to reclaim the agency that had been stolen from her, all the while knowing that every choice, every decision in the aftermath of this night would ripple across Newman Enterprises, the families intertwined with it, and the very fabric of trust and loyalty in Genoa City. And in that realization, as lightning streaked across the sky illuminating the mansion in stark, unforgiving flashes, she understood that the age of deception was over, that Holden and Sienna could no longer dictate the narrative, and that Claire, armed with the truth and the unyielding resolve of someone who had been wronged but refused to remain powerless, would rise above the shadows they had cast, setting in motion a chain of events that would forever alter the landscape of her life, their lives, and the lives of everyone connected to the treacherous, dramatic, and unpredictable world of the young and the restless. Claire's mind raced as the reality of Holden and Sienna's betrayal sunk in, each heartbeat echoing like a drum signaling the start of a war she had no choice but to fight. And though the initial shock had numbed her, clarity began to carve its path through the fog of confusion, revealing the intricate, painstakingly hidden web of deception that had governed the past months of her life. And as she looked at Holden, whose usually confident posture now seemed taut and fragile under the weight of his lies, she could see, in every twitch of his lips and every hesitant blink, the cracks in his armor, the vulnerability he had never intended her to witness, and in Sienna, poised and elegant, a mask of control that barely contained the panic behind her eyes, she realized that this confrontation was more than personal. It was political, social, and emotional, touching every corner of Genoa city society, because the Newman name carried power, influence, and reputations that had been carefully cultivated over decades, and the fallout of such a revelation would ripple across boardrooms, charity galas, and family gatherings alike, leaving no relationship untouched, no alliance unchallenged, and as she stood there, the envelope clutched in her hand like a weapon and a shield simultaneously, Claire felt a surge of determination, a fierce resolve that ignited in her chest and spread like wildfire through her veins, because she understood that in the world she had chosen to navigate, a world of wealth, ambition, and high-stakes drama, ignorance had never been an option, and complacency was a luxury she could no longer afford. And as the storm outside lashed against the mansion windows, mirroring the turmoil within, she thought of the countless small betrayals she had ignored. The half-truths, the misleading glances, the hurried phone calls, the hushed whispers when she had entered a room, all of which now combined into an undeniable pattern of treachery that pointed unerringly at Holden and Sienna, and with each memory came a bitter taste of realization that for months, maybe even years, she had been living in a carefully constructed illusion designed to protect their secrets while leaving her vulnerable, isolated, and uninformed. And though rage threatened to consume her, she steadied herself, knowing that action, strategy, and the precise timing of her moves would determine the outcome of this confrontation. And as her mind catalogued all possible scenarios, the betrayals, the confrontations, the consequences, the allies and enemies she could call upon, Claire's intellect sharpened into a weapon as potent as any physical force, because she had learned the hard way that knowledge, especially knowledge of someone's lies and manipulations, carried power, influence, and the ability to shape destinies, and the thought of the chaos that would ensue if the Newman family, the Abbotts, and all the intertwined players in Genoa City discovered the depth of Holden and Sienna's deception sent a shiver down her spine, a mix of anticipation and fear, because she knew she now held a piece of the city's most explosive puzzle, one that could topple empires, ruin reputations, and redefine relationships forever. And as she forced herself to breathe, the storm outside pounding against the windows like a relentless drummer announcing a coming revolution, she considered her options, weighing each action against its potential fallout, and realized that silence was no longer viable, passivity a dangerous luxury, because the secrets, once unearthed, demanded resolution, exposure, and consequence. And she recalled the faces of those who had unknowingly become collateral damage in Holden and Sienna's scheme. The friends she had confided in, the family who trusted her judgment, the colleagues whose careers could hang in the balance, and the thought that she could allow them to be blindsided, unaware of the truth, filled her with a righteous indignation that made her pulse race and her vision sharpen. And as she stepped closer, the envelope now burning in her palm with the weight of its revelations, she realized that confrontation was inevitable, a crucible in which loyalty, love, and ambition would be tested, strained, and potentially broken, because in a city like Genoa, secrets could no longer be contained, lies had a way of surfacing, and when they did, the damage was total, irrevocable, and all-consuming, and in that knowledge, Claire felt both dread and exhilaration, because while the path ahead promised heartbreak, anger, and chaos, it also offered clarity, empowerment, and the chance to reclaim control of her own narrative. and she thought of her own evolution over the past months. The way she had grown stronger, more cunning, more attuned to the subtle currents of deceit and ambition that governed every high-stakes encounter in the city, and she knew that this revelation, this final exposure of Holden and Sienna's duplicity, would serve as both a personal vindication and a pivotal turning point in her life, because once the truth was revealed, there would be no retreat, no hiding, no pretending that everything was normal, and she could see the expressions on their faces. Holden's tight-lipped anxiety, Sienna's controlled but faltering poise, and she understood that they too felt the weight of the moment, the inevitability of exposure, and the realization that their carefully orchestrated scheme was about to collapse. And as she inhaled sharply, the air thick with tension and the scent of impending rain, Claire began to envision the steps she would take, the allies she would call, the documents she would reveal, and the precise words that would unravel their facade, because in Genoa City, timing was everything, and the skillful orchestration of events could turn disaster into opportunity, betrayal into leverage, and chaos into triumph, and she knew that once she acted, there would be no turning back, only a forward march into a storm of emotions, confrontations, and consequences that would shake the foundations of her world. And as the wind howled outside, rattling the grand windows and making the chandeliers sway, Claire felt a strange calm settle over her, a clarity born of certainty, because she finally knew the truth. Holden and Sienna had deceived her, hidden things from her, manipulated circumstances for their own gain, and disrupted the lives of everyone around them, and now, armed with that knowledge, she was no longer the passive observer of her own life but the active agent of its future, and in that moment, as lightning illuminated the mansion in stark, unforgiving flashes, she recognized the power she now held, the responsibility that came with it, and the inevitable reckoning that would follow, because secrets, once exposed, demanded justice, and lies, once revealed, demanded accountability, and Claire, standing amidst the swirling storm, felt a surge of determination, anger, and vindication that steeled her for the battles to come, the confrontations that would unravel relationships, the shocking revelations that would leave the city reeling, and the carefully plotted strategies she would employ to ensure that Holden and Sienna could no longer dictate the narrative, could no longer control outcomes, and could no longer hide behind their facade of charm and manipulation. And as she stepped forward into the drawing room, envelope in hand, the storm outside reaching its crescendo, she understood that her life, the lives of everyone connected to her, and the very balance of power in Genoa City were about to change forever, because no more lies would be tolerated, no more secrets would be hidden, and the consequences of deception would finally, inevitably, come to light in a torrent of emotion, truth, and irrevocable action that would reverberate across every corner of the young and the restless universe. Claire's pulse pounded as she stood in the drawing room, gripping the envelope that held the devastating proof of Holden and Sienna's betrayal, a mixture of rage, disbelief, and vindication swirling inside her. And as the storm outside pelted the windows with rain and the wind shrieked like a chorus of warnings, she realized that nothing would ever be the same again, because for months, perhaps even years, she had been dancing on the edge of a knife, blind to the intricate web of manipulation. Spun by two people she had trusted implicitly, two people who had orchestrated a deceit so elaborate and so insidious that it had ensnared not just her heart and mind but the lives of everyone around her, from family members to friends, from colleagues to rivals. And as she looked at Holden, who now seemed smaller somehow, his carefully maintained composure crumbling under the weight of exposure, and Sienna, whose poised elegance had faltered into anxiety and subtle fear, she felt the sweet, terrible satisfaction of being right, of finally seeing through the facade that had masked their intentions, and yet beneath that satisfaction simmered a dangerous, burning fire of anger and determination, because the consequences of their deception were enormous, reaching into Newman Enterprises, threatening shareholder confidence, jeopardizing corporate alliances, and shaking the very foundations of the power structures in Genoa City. And as she thought of the countless dinners where Holden and Sienna had smiled at her, feigned innocence, and whispered empty reassurances, she could not help but recall the subtle tells she had ignored. The lingering looks that seemed secretive, the evasive answers, the faint tremor in Holden's voice whenever she pressed him on seemingly innocuous topics, the way Sienna would skillfully redirect conversations, and now every detail crystallized into an undeniable picture of manipulation, betrayal, and calculated deceit, and Claire's mind raced, cataloging the repercussions, the potential allies she could summon, and the devastating ways she could expose the truth in a manner that would leave them both reeling, powerless, and fully accountable. And as she surveyed the room, imagining the possible confrontations with Newman Enterprises board members, potential sabotage by the Abbotts, and the inevitable gossip and judgment that would sweep through Genoa City like a wildfire, she felt a mix of exhilaration and fear, knowing that knowledge, power, and timing were now hers to wield, and with that came a responsibility as terrifying as it was empowering, because the ripple effect of revealing Holden and Sienna's deception would affect marriages, friendships, business deals, and the carefully maintained reputations of every family intertwined with theirs. And as the lightning illuminated the room in stark, blinding flashes, casting moving shadows that mirrored the turmoil in her heart, Claire began to envision her next steps with meticulous precision, thinking of whom to approach first, which documents to reveal, how to protect herself from potential retaliation, and how to ensure that every lie, every misstep, every hidden agenda would be laid bare for all to see. And in that moment, she felt an unfamiliar surge of control and clarity, because for too long she had been the victim of circumstances she could not fully command, and now she was the architect of her own fate, armed with undeniable truth and a sense of purpose sharpened by the pain of betrayal. And as she reflected on the consequences, she imagined the shock on the faces of her family, the disbelief of friends, the trembling uncertainty of colleagues, and the quiet panic that would ripple through Holden and Sienna as the world discovered what she now knew. And every possibility played in her mind with cinematic intensity, the scenes of confrontation, public exposure, and private reckoning unfolding like a high-stakes drama that only she could orchestrate. And as she contemplated the delicate balance of vengeance, justice, and self-preservation, she remembered the subtle warnings from the past months, the fleeting moments when intuition had whispered truth and she had ignored it, now understanding that those warnings had been faint tremors in the foundation of an elaborate deception, tremors that had led her to this apex of revelation. And with each flash of lightning illuminating the mansion's elegant interior, she envisioned the domino effect of consequences that would cascade across the city. Ruined reputations, strained alliances, broken hearts, and shattered trusts, and though the enormity of what she faced was overwhelming, Claire felt a resolute strength building inside her, a certainty that she could not only survive the fallout but manipulate it to achieve clarity, justice, and empowerment. And as she recalled past confrontations, betrayals, and political maneuverings within Newman Enterprises, she recognized that Holden and Sienna had underestimated her, had assumed her emotional intelligence would never match their cunning, and in that hubris lay their vulnerability, a vulnerability she intended to exploit, because the truth, once revealed, was the most potent weapon she could wield, capable of upending empires, destroying alliances, and exposing every hidden motive. And in that realization, she understood the stakes were higher than mere personal revenge. This was about corporate strategy, family loyalty, social reputation, and the very power dynamics of Genoa City. And with each passing moment, the storm outside seemed to echo the tempest of emotions inside her: anger, grief, empowerment, clarity, fear, and exhilaration merging into a singular focus that guided her next moves. And as she paced, the envelope pressing into her palm as a tangible symbol of revelation, she considered every person affected by Holden and Sienna's betrayal. The Newman board members who trusted him implicitly, the Abbott family members whose business dealings intertwined with the Newman legacy, the employees of Newman Enterprises who might lose their positions in the chaos, and the friends whose emotional loyalty had been tested by hidden truths. And she understood that every decision, every strategic choice, would ripple through multiple layers of influence, potentially triggering crises, confrontations, and alliances that could either fortify her position or endanger it. And in that complex calculus, Claire's mind became a battlefield of logic, emotion, and strategy, weighing the timing of revelations against the anticipated reactions, considering who to trust, who to confront directly, and who to manipulate subtly to achieve maximum effect. And as the rain hammered against the windows and the wind howled like a living entity, she imagined the perfect confrontation. Holden caught off guard, Sienna faltering under the weight of exposure, the board members questioning their judgment, family alliances shifting, friends re-evaluating loyalties, and the public perception of Newman Enterprises hanging in the balance, all orchestrated with the precision of a master strategist and the ruthless resolve of someone who had finally tasted the intoxicating clarity of truth. And yet, beneath the planning, beneath the tactical execution, there was an emotional undertone, a deep recognition of the pain that betrayal inflicted, the heartbreak caused by deception, and the challenge of navigating a city where every revelation had consequences that could escalate into unexpected chaos. And she knew that even as she prepared to wield the truth like a weapon, she had to remain vigilant against the unpredictable reactions of those around her, because in Genoa City, even the smallest disclosure could cascade into unforeseen consequences. Alliances could fracture in unexpected ways, and the fragile balance of power could tip in favor of those she had not anticipated. And as her thoughts spiraled into the labyrinthine complexities of interpersonal dynamics, business politics, and family legacies, she felt an exhilarating mix of empowerment and trepidation, understanding that this night would mark a turning point not only in her own life but in the fabric of Genoa City itself, because Holden and Sienna's duplicity had set in motion events that could not be undone, and the exposure of their lies would trigger consequences so vast that every player, every Newman, every Abbott, every loyal employee, every friend, every rival, would be forced to confront truths that could redefine their lives. And in that understanding, Claire felt the weight of responsibility and the thrill of agency intertwine, giving her the clarity, courage, and cunning she would need to navigate the storm she had uncovered, to strategically unleash the revelations she held, and to ensure that Holden and Sienna would finally face the consequences of their actions in a spectacle as dramatic, powerful, and emotionally charged as any storyline in the long, intricate tapestry of the young and the restless. And as the first bolt of lightning struck the mansion, illuminating every opulent detail with a stark, revealing light, Claire took a slow, deliberate breath, feeling the power of knowledge, the inevitability of exposure, and the potential for complete transformation settle over her. Because the truth was no longer just information, it was a weapon, a shield, and a declaration, and with it, she would change the course of lives, families, and fortunes forever.